Hallo Liz, erzählen Sie uns doch bitte, was Sie als Wissenschaftlerin am Good Food Institute machen.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this event. I'm thrilled to be in front of this audience. My background is that I'm an engineer and a biologist by training. I left academic research almost 2 years ago to join the Good Food Institute, pretty close to the time it was founded. And I did this because I saw this as the most high impact area to apply my technical skills to solve the challenge of sustainably feeding a growing world in a way that's good for the environment, good for people, and good for animals.
Was machen Sie dort genau? Sie persönlich?
In my role as senior scientist, I wear a lot of hats, but I spend most of my time in one of these three areas. One, reviewing the literature and speaking with folks in industry and synthesizing that information into white papers and peer-reviewed articles that articulate what are the technological needs for this growing animal product alternative sector. Two, advising startups by giving feedback on their research plan and scientific strategy. And then three, serving as a resource for investors who want in on the enormous opportunities in this sector, but need assistance with the technical part of their due diligence.
Was hat Sie dazu bewegt, sich mit Alternativen zu herkömmlichem Fleisch zu befassen und sich nicht auf pflanzliche Ersatzprodukte zu konzentrieren?
Plant-based meat is getting better and better every year, as you know, but there are still many, many consumers who want the real thing, so to speak. So rather than trying to convince them otherwise, which hasn't been successful over the past several decades of advocacy by other organizations, our approach is to say, let's meet them where they're at, and let's try to find better, more sustainable ways to produce the products they actually already want.
Was benötigt man eigentlich zur Herstellung von InVitroFleisch?
There are four critical technologies that converge to produce clean meat. You start with a sample of animal cells, or the cell line, that can proliferate, which means grow and divide, and also mature into the desired final cell types, so muscle cells, fat cells, and so forth. Second, you feed these cells with what's called a cell culture medium, which is a mixture of salts and sugars and amino acids, all of the basic building blocks of cells. Third, when these cells have expanded their population, they're seeded onto what's called a scaffolding material, which gives them a 3D structure and allows them to mature into the actual tissues containing muscle fibers. And then fourth, all of these processes are occurring within pieces of equipment called bioreactors. So really, this is just a fancy name for the cultivators. So the cell lines, the cell culture media, the scaffolding, and the bioreactors are all critical to make these products.
Welche technologischen Probleme müssen noch gelöst werden, bevor das Produkt marktfähig ist?
Economically viable is the key word there. We already know this is possible, as multiple startup companies have already demonstrated prototypes, but we need to scale up and we need to bring costs down, and we need to develop more sophisticated, thicker products. Imagine something like a steak rather than just a ground beef burger. A lot of the cost at the current time comes from the cell culture media that we talked about. So there are other scaling challenges to address. There are opportunities to automate the production system to increase efficiency, for example, which will also bring down costs. And for those aspects, we can look to recent innovations in fields like biopharma and cell-based therapies and industrial biotechnology to help guide us there.
Die Gewebekultur in der Petrischale ist eine gänzlich andere Größenordnung als die gewöhnliche Massenproduktion im Bioreaktor. Wie groß müssen wir uns Produktionskessel vorstellen und wie viel Laborfleisch sollen da pro Tag produziert werden?
The production volume calculations I've done, and those I've seen from a few companies and other experts in the field, typically use a reactor size of 20,000 liters because this is the size at which animal cell culture is currently being done for some of those other biomedical applications I mentioned. In my calculations, I anticipate we can ultimately derive at least something like 3,500 kilograms from a reactor of this size over the course of a few weeks. If we move from a relatively inefficient batch process to higher productivity, semi-continuous or continuous processes, these numbers can get much higher.
Es gibt einige Institute, die an der Entwicklung von Clean Meat arbeiten, zum Beispiel Supermeat in Israel mit Rindfleisch oder auch Marktpost in den Niederlanden mit Geflügelfleisch. Stehen sie im Wettbewerb untereinander? Wer kommt als Erster auf den Markt und wer findet die größte finanzielle Unterstützung? Denn die ganze Entwicklung kostet ja auch sehr viel Geld.
Both of these companies, in addition to all the others in this increasingly crowded landscape, are not competitors. Our aim is to help the industry as a whole succeed, and there's plenty of room for multiple companies in this space, given the enormous size of the existing market, as well as the diversity of products. It's hard to predict who will be first to market, of course. Most project that they'll be in the market in some form in the next 3 to 5 years, which seems reasonable to me given the technological challenges ahead. But Memphis Meats, a San Francisco-based company, has attracted the most investment so far that we're aware of. Last summer, they closed a $17 million Series A financing round from investors that included firms like DFJ, which has invested in SpaceX and Tesla, other sort of futuristic visionary technologies, as well as Richard Branson, Bill Gates, and even the meat company Cargill.
Wie bewerten Sie die Gefahr oder die Möglichkeit, Ihre Arbeit patentieren zu lassen? Sie könnten ein Monopolanbieter werden und halt auch den Preis ein Stück weit mitbestimmen. Ist das nicht eine Gefahr?
I think there's very little risk of this, honestly, because there are so many variations in the possible production platform or the approach that various companies are pursuing. It would be very difficult for one company to write, say, a defensible patent that would actually block others from doing this. Furthermore, most of the founders of these companies aren't just in it for the money. They went out on a limb, in many cases sacrificed very successful careers in medicine or in research to start these companies because they truly believe in the mission of developing a more fair and sustainable food system. In fact, many of the companies have expressed a lot of interest in exploring frameworks for sharing intellectual property, something like a patent pledge or an IP pool that's been used in the technology industry, which helps them all get to market faster and not waste resources reinventing the wheel to solve problems that other companies have already solved.
Trauen Sie dem Fleisch aus dem Labor zu, das konventionelle Fleisch völlig zu verteufeln aus der Nahrungskette des Menschen?
I think there will be a transition period where consumers have many options, including conventional meat, clean meat, and plant-based meat. Over time, I envision that conventional meat demand will decrease as we see demand for plant-based meat and clean meat increase. I don't know if or when we might see total replacement of conventional meat. It may be that there's always some level of demand for small-scale farms producing so-called high-welfare meat. I don't know. But if clean meat and plant-based meat can phase out kind of the worst of meat production, by this I mean intensive, highly confined, industrialized animal agriculture, then I think the planet, human public health, and animals will all be much better off.
Sie sind Vegetarierin. Ich hoffe, das stimmt. Wie schmeckt Ihnen Laborfleisch?
I am all for it. I actually had the privilege to try Memphis Meat's duck meat, and it was delicious. I didn't become vegetarian personally out of dislike for the taste of meat. I became vegetarian because I disliked the consequences of how it's produced at industrial scale. So if I can eat the same product, but it's made in a way that I agree with, I am totally on board.
InVitroFleisch steht auch für die zunehmende Entfremdung zwischen Konsumenten auf der einen Seite und den Herstellern von Lebensmitteln auf der anderen Seite. Ist das im Sinne eines bewussten Umgangs mit der Natur überhaupt erstrebenswert?
To the contrary, I think clean meat actually allows us to have a much more honest relationship with our food and to support production systems that are much healthier for us and for the environment. It offers a degree of transparency, if you think about it, that's simply not possible with our current food system. The fact is that today's consumers eat meat despite how it's produced, not because of how it's produced. And for large part, consumers are actually quite open to technology, even when it comes to their food, as long as the benefits to the consumer are made clear. Otherwise, they might assume technology is being used to benefit the producer, to bring down their costs or allow them to cut corners somewhere. But if consumers are informed about how clean meat eliminates the risk of foodborne illness, may increase shelf life of these products, doesn't contribute to public health threats like zoonotic diseases and antibiotic resistance that emanate from factory farms but can potentially harm anyone, it becomes clear that this is a product consumers can stand behind and feel good about.
Lassen Sie uns über die Umweltfreundlichkeit von InVitroFleisch reden, Frau Specht. Ich kenne bisher nur Lebenszyklusanalysen, die den Labormaßstab zugrunde legen. Gibt es eigentlich seriöse Berechnungen für das Produktionssystem in einem Großmaßstab?
Life cycle analyses, as you probably know, are notoriously difficult even for systems that do exist at large scale. Right now, the existing life cycle analyses are, by definition, highly speculative because they have to make a lot of guesses about what this process will ultimately look like at scale. There are a few that have been published, but they're all works in progress.
Was macht Sie denn so sicher, dass die Verbraucher InVitroFleisch akzeptieren und dass er es überhaupt annimmt? Die meisten Menschen lehnen ja gentechnische veränderte Lebensmittel ab, genauso wie das Klonen von Nutztieren. Weshalb sollten also Verbraucher genetisch identisches Fleisch kaufen wollen?
First, I'd like to clarify that clean meat in no way requires genetic engineering or modification. The cells are just doing what they do naturally, growing, dividing, maturing into muscle and fat. Secondly, there have been a number of consumer studies, actually, and surveys assessing consumer acceptance of clean meat. And the numbers are, in my opinion, already surprisingly high, even when the studies frame the technology in a very negative way, calling it lab-grown meat, for example. There's a well-known psychological phenomenon that the more people are exposed to an idea, the more comfortable they become with that idea.
Wäre in diesem Moment eigentlich Ihre Aufgabe am GFI beendet?
Honestly, I think every nonprofit organization's ultimate goal should be to render themselves obsolete. We were founded to address a problem. That was the challenge of building a more sustainable, healthier, more humane food system through alternatives to industrialized animal agriculture. And if that's achieved, whether it's through 100% plant-based alternatives or through some combination of plant-based and clean meat, our job is done. I'll retire early, and I'll do so as a very happy woman.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.